Welcome to Implicating the Real. My name is Michael. I'm joined by my good friends Joe and Liana. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing all right. It might be a sloppy one this week.
Why do you say that?
I'm just in a sloppy mood.
All right. Well, that could be good. Maybe.
Maybe.
Liana, how are you?
Great.
Yeah. It's not as cold as last week, but still a nice day.
Yeah, still a nice day. It's still sunny.
You guys got a kick out of me saying it was a nice cold day last week. Like, it's nice and cold.
You know, I thought about you saying that when I was like jumping my car.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah.
What a nice cold day out it is.
When it's negative and you have to or change your battery, that's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
All right, where are we at today? Well, I wanted to say too, last week we had a little bit of debate that I feel like we'll revisit at some point, but I'm verbally trying to resist getting right back into that right now. But having said that, I wanted to just offer one thing. I feel like I should have came to this in the conversation, but we were talking about the overdetermination thing. And what do you think of this? We're in a video game, Joe, and I'm telling you, but there's actually a larger reality, and there's a Joe player that's playing you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel like overdetermined? Because I feel like it's kind of the same thing as what we're trying to get at last week.
You'd have to do some sort of scientific study of the game environment, right? If you're studying the game environment and you discover that there's weird, wacky stuff to how the coded patterns of the game work, then you might be okay, there's a reason for these things happening, and we need to study why they're happening.
Right? But I mean, just let's just take the game. Somebody's playing a game. We know that, but the character in the game, this game, the game of life, is by design, according to this theory, so immersive that we don't even know that there's an outside to the game.
No, I agree with Joe though.
Oh.
That's why I don't believe in materialism anymore, is the weird, wacky things that happen that the video game can't account for.
Right, but I'm just saying specifically for the overdetermination, it doesn't, I think it's easy to see that they're not doing the same thing. The person playing the game and the character within the game are obviously two different experiences, and I think it's valid to theorize that without being chunky or overdetermined.
Well, the determination thing is from the standpoint of contrasting theories, right? So it's whether something is determined under or overdetermined is from the standpoint of trying to decide its epistemic value or epistemic
So compared to theory B, C, and D, those might be simpler, and therefore Occam wants to go in that direction.
Right. So you'd have to posit what set of facts you're sort of trying to account for, and then the argument could be well, this theory about the player character is just far too, it accounts for far too many things too many times. So it's you could have a simpler explanation of it. That's what overdetermining it is
right.
Fact A, B, and C have reason 1, 2, and 3 that any of those 3 alone would explain them, but you're positing all 3 for no reason, right? You're positing extra entities to account for things that you have already accounted for, right?
Yeah, but that's exactly why I don't like it, because we see that there's an actual valid situation where there's a player and a character. We play video games, right?
But are we from the perspective of the player or from the perspective of the character?
Well, I'm just trying to delineate why we can't rely on Occam's razor exclusively. I understand if you're trying to say which of these theories is more true,
right?
But part of what our conversation last week was impinging towards was this idea where science gives us this neat picture of measurable things, but we know as human beings that there's a lot of life that veers beyond what's easily measurable, and so therefore we have ideas like this that they're not against the science, but they're reaching into theory. And that's all we're doing here, is saying this is a theory. And to me, there's a lot of reason that it's plausible that there's a deeper reality holding this one in the same way that, there's this reality holding a video game within it.
Right.
Do you mean like the Occam's razor isn't a good enough reason for me to like think this is an invalid idea?
I mean, why would we go with Occam's razor when we can draw plenty of examples from real life where that's wrong? All those people who were ever incarcerated for something that circumstantial evidence neatly and patently pointed to them as the culprit are they're proof that you can't just go with Occam's razor.
I mean, I don't know if it's Occam's razor that's the problem with that historical example, right? Like, I think that the argument would be that if you're applying the heuristic appropriately, they were in fact correct at the end of the analysis, right? It's just that during the course of the analysis taking place in historical time for a community of people can have errors. A community of people can have biases. A community of people can, subjugate other people for reasons that are entirely inappropriate to what they claim to be doing. Like, people can be hypocrites, right? Even if the technique they're applying is a valid, like, logical, reasonable way of doing things, right? Like, that's just the product of them being like people in a society, not a problem of the rationality of the system they are aspiring to use.
That's fair, but all those flaws still apply in like this philosophical discussion of what is reality.
Yeah, it does.
So therefore, because we are flawed, we can't really just go with Occam's razor, no?
Well, we should still be aspiring to the best, like, standard we can. Like, that's no reason to apply to a standard that we would agree is a worse standard. Like, hypothetically, if we were like standard 1 versus standard 2, we all three of us agree that standard 1 is a better operating procedure, but we can't do it in principle perfectly. That's not a reason to do standard 2, right?
I agree,
Yeah.
but it should be a reason to see that standard 1 can sometimes be flawed.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
And let's outline what we're doing here, because I think like what we learn about Occam's razor, I think if you're saying if it eventually gets there, it's because the context eventually broadens and then we can understand maybe there is a simple explanation, or that becomes the simplest when the context is expanded.
Yeah, and
But
there's like a critique you can make. Like, I think one of the strongest critiques against it, right, might be sort of a deeper, like, sort of suspicion about what does simplicity even mean.
yeah,
When, like, you're in an intellectual tradition and, like, that tradition takes complex ideas and it, like, sort of packs them down so that you can describe them with, like, very short sentences, right?
Yeah.
Like, once you learn technical language, you can explain a complex idea with, like, a single word. So then the wordiness of your explanation can get shorter when you've, like, been immersed in a tradition for a while, and then it can appear simpler, right?
mm-hmm.
So there is some care that you have to take in describing what is and isn't, like, a simple explanation, right? So, like, I think that critique is really well taken, right?
Well, the other thing I was going to add is like what we're doing kind of on this podcast and a lot of philosophy is like reaching into the broader context, the unknown broader context.
Right.
So therefore, it's worth like considering these ideas valid and the other reasons why we might feel that they're valid, because that context could provide the context to make the explanation we're talking about actually be the simplest one.
Right, yeah, it is part of our work is to be able to put sort of new ideas on the fringe onto an equal footing so that the comparison can be made fairly, right?
Yeah.
That's the tricky part of the work.
All right, that's all I wanted to throw out there.
Sure.
I didn't want to like rehash. It would be fun to like go back down that road. I was thinking like we could maybe re-release that part of that episode, and then we could like actually just come prepared to have that conversation.
Somebody could have like a moderator.
Maybe
We
might
could
need
award
one.
points.
Yeah, we don't have to get that technical, but I just feel like that's part of our dynamic here, and I think it's a cool thing, and it's gonna come up whether we plan to have it come up or not.
Yeah.
Eventually. Today we're doing chapter 14 of Seth Speaks, subtitled "Stories of the Beginning and the Multidimensional God." Heard on the streets that Liana's not too into this chapter.
I'm not really sure how this is practically applicable to Liana's life.
I think there'll be some little details that would be fun to talk about, but
I mean, maybe our listeners are big tithers, They can put that money back in their pocket. Think of how many McChickens you can buy every Sunday
Tithers
instead
is-
of putting money into the church.
Tithers, yeah.
Tithers. Any tithers in the chat?
I don't know if I've ever heard that term.
I know what tithing is, so I got there, but
Apparently, if you it's tax season, listener. If you tithe enough, you can put it on your taxes.
oh, I believe that.
Uh huh.
I was just doing my taxes this past weekend, and my partner was telling me about how he's had people like audited by the IRS because they tithed way too much, like way above 10%, just like half their income.
Jesus, literally Jesus.
Yeah.
Who are they buying? Like, what's that thing called that you used to be able to do when you could like buy people's way out of purgatory?
What? That was ever a thing?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know.
indulgences. Who are they buying indulgences for?
That makes sense, but I'm not familiar with that either. Hey man, money talks even in hell and purgatory.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I'll just jump right in the first paragraph here. As the present life of any individual rises from hidden dimensions beyond those easily accessible in physical terms, and as it draws its energy and power to act from unconscious sources, so does the present physical universe, as you know it, rise from other dimensions. So does it have its source and derive its energy from deeper realities. I think that's a good jumping off point, as usual, with Seth giving us that context. Joe, did this strike you as in any way at all?
So, I guess the thing I would talk about here is that we're sort of going to get a This sort of like is introducing this idea that we're going to talk about. And I think Seth is going to be more explicit when he like sort of invokes this idea. The idea of like a prime mover for like the world or reality, right? This prime mover idea is like really old and really big in like the Western Christian philosophical tradition of sort of describing like what is God in a metaphysical sense, like what is the actual upshot of like this is what we think this God entity is and is doing for reality, right? Is that there is sort of like a source for like the things that we observe in like the larger universe.
Yeah. We're going to get into it, but like what I was thinking in this chapter, and it seems obvious, I don't need this to like get there, but like we say things like God is like all powerful and ubiquitous and unimaginable, but we don't even, when we talk about further ideas of God, we don't really use our imagination very well. You know what I mean? Like when you start saying that the God is a multidimensional God, or like if you got to expand your ideas, like you have this idea where your mind expands about, you know, where yourself comes from, or like this is his idea, but like you have to apply that like exponentially to your ideas of God. I feel like talking about that idea, and later he'll say God is more like an idea, that we have to have like constant surface level humility and saying that like this is this idea that represents everything, and therefore like whatever we say is going to be inadequate, and that has to be the context of our conversation about it. Does that make sense?
I think it's a common refrain that you see in like discussions of God, especially in like discussions of like the nature of God, like the inability of like one concept to fully capture, right? Like the essence of the thing. I think that generally speaking, like this is brought up by a lot of really intelligent people, so I don't want to diminish that, but I think it is sort of like a cheat a lot of times in the argument to just be like, well, it's just too hard for you to imagine. And it's like, what other kind of thing is like that, right?
Well, I don't mean it as a cheat or like a way of not talking about it. I mean it as like a context of like no matter what we say, you know, like somebody's going to come along some other day and say like, well, they didn't have the imagination to even put this into perspective, you know.
Right.
It's more of a caveat.
Yeah. Like to me, it's sort of like a lot of the talk about God, like this is sort of the difficulty of doing it. Right. And like for somebody who is faithful, like I can understand why this would be a difficulty, is that you sort of have like reference, like you can like point towards the thing, like you know the direction, you know where it is, right? If you're like a faithful person and you feel like you actually sort of have been touched by the divine, right? You have some understanding of the divine. It's very difficult to be able to sort of like point at that, but not fully be able to like capture it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like supposed to be like in the nature of what it is.
Yeah, it's like the classic map and territory problem, right? Like this is the ultimate territory.
Well, and the difficulty is that the supposition is that no map would be sufficient.
Right.
Whereas most territory you can make a map.
Right. And that's partly what I'm trying to get at with that
Yeah.
caveat. It's always going to be insufficient. That's not an explanation,
Which
and it's not a cop-out.
Right, and if you're a map maker, you kind of have to raise your eyebrows and go like, it's just on principle I can't do it, or like you just can't do it, right? Like that's the question, right?
We were talking about Lao Tzu or Taoism a little bit before we went on mic here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's the one that I attribute to like, this religion is just the finger pointing toward the moon. Is that Lao Tzu? Like,
I haven't heard that, but that's really
Yeah.
funny.
yeah, it's not like when we're describing these things, we're just describing the map basically.
Mm,
And like the finger pointing towards the moon, like saying that's the moon is still not the moon. You know what I mean? We can point to the moon and say that's the moon,
yeah.
but it's just the finger pointing to the moon. Does that?
Oh,
capture
you're saying the
anything?
religion is the finger itself.
Yeah, like we have to understand, like, even though we can point to it and talk about it, that we still don't know what it is.
What was that? Is that a Wittgenstein thing? Like he starts off I think he starts off like his one book by saying like, that of which cannot be spoken, like one must remain silent, something like that.
Sounds familiar.
Just the very Taoist idea of like, well, like what you're saying with like the moon, like to fully like like if you were to show someone the moon for the first time, like you wouldn't want to sit them down and like talk to them about it and like, make little sketches of it. You just want to take them outside and just be like,
Yeah.
Say nothing.
So,
let them see it.
but that said, the remaining hour and a half of this podcast is just going to be silence. Let it really sink in.
Well, that's right, because like that's how Wittgenstein started out that book, but then he went, well, anyways, here's the rest of my book.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always in this place where like I don't want to skip over anything, but I also don't want to read everything. So you got anything coming up right there?
I think the next one's good. I'll read it.
Yeah.
History as you know it represents but one single light upon which you focus. You interpret the events that you see therein, and you project upon its glimmer your interpretation of events that may occur. So entranced is your concentration that when you wonder about the nature of reality, you automatically confine your question to this one small flickering moment that you call physical reality. When you ponder upon the aspects of God, you unthinkingly speak of the creator of that one light. That light is unique, and if you truly understand what it was, you would indeed understand the nature of true reality. History, as you think of it, represents but one thin line of probabilities, in which you are presently immersed. It does not represent the entire lifetime of your species, or the catalog of physical activities, or begin to tell the story of physical creatures, their civilizations, wars, joys, technologies, or triumphs. Reality is far more diverse, far richer, and unutterable than you can presently suppose or comprehend. Evolution, as you think of it, and as it is categorized by your scientists, represents but one probable line of evolution, the one in which, again, you are presently immersed.
I like that.
Yeah, for me, this is just like, it ties together a little bit of like, sort of the through line that we've been getting in like a few of the last couple chapters, where like there's this theme that Seth keeps bringing up of like history, and like history being sort of wedded like necessarily to like the limitations of physical reality. So like to give a historical analysis of something is to be limited by the historical like particularity of that.
Yeah, we're still trapped in this like one thin line sort of outlook.
Right.
And so he's going in kind of the obvious direction where that there's like all these probabilities and like different kinds of probabilities, and I still haven't found a good term to like describe that. I usually say like thickness or richness. There's this plurality. And this is kind of one of the things I was getting at is like we're capable of imagining that, but a lot of times we just don't go down that road when we're trying to imagine or describe the unimaginable thing that is God.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I got here is With splendid innocence and exuberant pride, you imagine that the evolutionary system as you know it is the only one, that physically there can be no more. Now, within the physical reality that you know, there are hints and clues as to the nature of other physical realities. There are latent, within your own physical forms, other senses, unused, that could have come to the front, but in your probability did not. Now I have been speaking of earthly developments, realities therefore clustered about earthly aspects as you know them. That first sentence actually was the one that caught me. It's just like splendid innocence and exuberant pride. And I think our just little preamble about Occam's razor is relevant here because he's talking about like we have this extraordinary access to measure and be knowledgeable about this one thin line. And it is difficult to like expand from that because we have to lower our thresholds for certainty to like explore the territory beyond that.
I think there's some sort of interesting thing going on here that sort of can maybe shed light of like how that sort of expansion works. Like in my notes, I've got a little bit like of extra sort of like research I did around wanting to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because like with this whole probabilities thing, what seems to be happening here is you're getting sort of um you have like a reification of potential realities. Like potentiality is like also reality in this system of thought. So like different ways of thinking about this might be that like if I were to talk about potential worlds, right? Like potential states of how the world can be, I could say like it is possible, right, that I'm wearing like green socks today, but I'm actually wearing gray socks today, right? And like there's some difference that's supposed to be present in the difference between like something potentially being real and actually being real, right? Um and you can describe these things in different ways. But like the most popular way currently is that we think about them as sort of like diverging world lines, right? Where there's one world where everything is exactly the same as it is right now, except my socks have changed, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's this idea called
I like the green sock world, by the way.
I should have. I know.
No
I'm sorry.
offense.
I brought the gray sauce to the listener, but listener, you can imagine them as any color you would like.
I give you permission.
Um, but there's this idea called modal realism, right? Where it's saying like you can still have all this like analysis of potential worlds be valid and work in exactly the same way, but we can imagine that these worlds are equally as real as our world, right? There's like a plurality to the system, right? And this is in contrast to the other way you could see it, which is that actuality has some sort of like specialness to it. And in that case, what we're saying when we talk about a potential world is we're talking about features of the actual world, right? It's just a way of parsing something about the historical physical world, is saying there's a potential world, but that's sort of an imagined construct that applies for its referent to the real world,
Yeah.
right? So those are sort of different ways of parsing, like talking about potentiality.
I can follow that. What are the terms for those two different ideas, or is there?
I don't know what the other one's called. I'm a fan of like I call it standard, but I don't even know if it's like philosophically considered standard. I just consider it like more self-evident of just like the idea of like possible worlds are just features of the real world.
Yeah.
But then modal realism, you could read like I think his name's David Lewis. Lewis at least. The idea of modal realism is that other one where it's like possible worlds are literally just other worlds that like
Yeah.
exist.
I think it's well, you tell me if this is interesting, but I think it's interesting to maybe tie back again to our conversation from last week. I was struggling to delineate how what I was remembering how like quantum physics like diverged from like materialism. But to me, I think where it is like you know like you said the maths are the same. The math has to use probabilities for it to work. And probabilities, probable worlds, I think is incompatible with a materialist point of view unless you're really stretching it. But that's like the wave function collapsing into a particle. The wave function, I think, represents that all that potential, the collapse, the observation, the introduction of consciousness makes this one of those timelines. And so the Sethian perspective is all those other worlds are the primary world to the consciousness within them. You know, that's why he's saying there's like another one of us in each of those probabilities to that person.
Sure.
That's their primary reality.
But this does come with some complications, right?
For sure.
Like, for example, like if each one of them has a different version of us, it's like, what does it mean to be you, you know?
Yeah, that's a question, but like that question exists anyways.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I mean, what does it mean to be me exists anyways? It's a different version of that question.
It's a reference question, right? Like I can still reference you. Like it's not that hard to be like, you know, like Michael is this person. Like this is what a person is, and he's a person and he's in this room, right? If I say like, okay, one of the famous examples is like if so and so had won the election, right? Like if like Humphrey had won the election in that possible world. And then you're like, okay, like that's not the same person as Humphrey who lost the election. That's a different person.
Right. I'm not
Right.
saying that they're the same. I'm just saying the question is the same form of question. Like, to me, if you're an existing thing at any point in any reality, you're questioning yourself. Like, what am I?
Right, but it's more of a question of like what is your compatibility to the other quote unquote version of you, right? Because this is all talking about possible realities in which things are kept somewhat similar to our current reality, right? And there's like that you have what's it called? Corresponding, you know, like mirrors of yourself.
Mhm.
And it's like that correspondence is like the thing that's at issue.
To me, this isn't a problem. It's just a larger question. It's a larger version of the same questions we come here asking.
Yeah, I feel like this leads into like deep issues that like one of them is sort of like with contingency, right? Like if you think that there's like cause and effect, like in this really like expanded version of reality, it starts being the case that like cause and effect sort of like loses a little bit of its meaning. Because for something to be a cause of something else, it has to be that thing needs to be contingent on the other fact.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big question, but I'm not so attached to the cause and effect having to be like worked the way that I initially thought it worked. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's the issue, though. We're looking at it from like Michael and I are looking at it from a Sethian point of view. And
Right.
Seth straight up says cause and effect is a myth. So you're saying that if we're going to look at other probable views, we need some line of similarity between them all so that they are all identifying the same thing. But Seth would say like there is not necessarily similarities between all the probable yous, all the probable Joes.
Yeah.
In terms of Joe personality, the true similarity comes from all the Joes are part of the same entity. So like when I think about this, I think about how we have a lot of really divergent species that are of animals that are classified or plants in the same genus, even though they're very, very different. But we're not classifying them based on how similar their phenotypes are. We might be classifying them based on pure genetic similarities, as
Right.
opposed to like how do those genes reflect out and then make the animal or plant look like that.
Yeah.
So they're still related, but like I mean, I guess it just comes from like classifying them based on similarity or classifying them based on like true origin, which in a Sethian point of view would be an entity, and in a biological point of view would be like a common ancestor.
Right. It would be like a historical analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
The borders between things like are defined more in gestalts, and this is why Seth's idea of value fulfillment becomes so much greater or has so much more weight, I think, in my opinion, is because when you are truly asking what's the difference between me and that other Michael and that other reality, it's the things that are so important to me in this reality that I choose to do them here, and I make a different choice there. So our values are different. And at the entity level, the value is even a little bit more twisted because the entity wants a multiplicity of experiences. So it values having this focus of me where I have my set of values and that other Michael where it has that set of values. And so it's getting all of this. So like you just end up being like a Joe apple on a giant Joe apple tree. They're all similar, they're all different. And the apple tree is like, this is what I want. I want all these apples.
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I like bringing the philosophical rigor to this, but I just think like we do have to acknowledge we are just like wandering into theory, and like again, I'm thinking this doesn't conflict with science, even though we're like leaving behind some of the methodology, which you have to do when you're going into theory.
Right. Yeah.
But our cutting edge science tends to agree with some of these ideas.
I mean, I suppose, yeah. Like,
I think so.
cutting edge science agrees with a lot of things. Like,
But I mean, like,
to some extent.
like what I was saying with like the math about the probabilities, like that's how that connects with this world.
Explain why you don't think probabilities can exist, like, in a physicalist sense.
Well, because how would they? Like it's about space and time, right? Like a materialist point of view.
Because you're talking about quantum physics, but I just want to talk about probabilities in general, right? Like,
How do they exist?
like if I show you a die and I say like there are 6 states to which this die can land, that's just like a fact about the die, right?
Mhm.
Like about how the die interacts with like a flat surface and gravity, right?
Mhm.
Therefore, there's a 1 in 6 chance that if I throw the die, it's on any of the numbers. Like that's just what probability is, right? It's talking about different potential future states of a system.
Mhm.
But you're saying that that can't happen in a physicalist like analysis. Like you can't have probability.
No, I mean actual probabilities, like we were talking about before, those two versions where one is just like this idea of potential, and then this is the actual, and the other idea is that they're all actual, and this one is actual from our perspective, and that one's actual from their perspective.
What do you mean an actual probability? Like
Like
what's
it exists. That's why it's incompatible, because these other probabilities are they're other physical universes that in a materialist point of view can't coexist because of it would be mutually exclusive with the same time and the same space.
Are you saying that because there are 5 other faces on the die, it can't like be on one of them and have the probability?
Well, I'm not even
exist?
talking about the die.
But like
I'm talking about probabilities that are actual, in that the math of quantum physics uses the idea of actual probabilities.
what's the difference between an actual and a potential probability?
That's what I'm saying, is like the actual ones are actual in those probabilities.
I don't
And-
know what the word actual is doing
I
here.
think he means like the actual one is the one that you can perceive right now. You, this probable Joe.
So you're saying the resolution of the probability into one of the possible states. Is that what you mean by actual?
No, I'm sorry. I think I'm trying to be clear, but like all of these other probabilities are probable or potential to us from this perspective, but they exist in the same way this one exists to a higher point of view.
But why can't that happen in a physical like if we were in a single world line and like things were happening based on like physics, why can't we use probability to describe what's happening?
You can describe what's happening. You just can't use it to, like, just can't have the same idea of like actual other probabilities exist.
Well, yeah, because you're using the word exist, but like the probability in that description is a feature of the system, right? Like it doesn't invalidate the probability that not all options happened. That's kind of the point of a probability, right? Is that only some of them happen. Like, do you think that that's counter to the concept of probability, that like not all the options happen?
I guess this takes it to a deeper question, and I don't know if I'm like qualified to answer. But I think the fact that like hardcore scientists and mathematicians are getting to this point where they like believe in probabilities,
I
not
don't think
just in like the potential.
I don't think that's what they believe, though. Like, I think that they would agree with me that like you don't need to have all of the possibilities actualized for a probability to be a thing that you can use, right?
Well, you definitely don't need to do the math.
Yeah, and that's
But
all
like,
probability is
but
a
what
mathematical abstraction.
but what this like worldview is positing, that math represents actualities, other actualities.
Right.
It's
And
not just theory or potential
right.
or possibilities. And that idea is what I'm saying can exist in a material point of view, right? We can't have multiple of this earth on different timelines existing in a materialist point of view.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's already baked into the idea of I guess my point is like that's already what probability means. Like it seems like you're sort of justifying the worldview by leaning on something that already assumes the thing that you're trying to prove, right? Like that's already baked into what a probability is. Like that's the whole point of the probability is that only one of the states can happen.
No, contextually, one of the states happens from the context of our context, but this is saying there's a higher context. That's the point that
Right,
we're trying to move towards.
But if you're the one who's making that argument, you can't just lean on the idea of the probability as evidence because the probability is invented with that assumption already in it.
I'm not saying this is like foolproof evidence,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying like it's absolutely compatible. And so for like, to me, it's very valid to like just let's move into this theory and see what it looks like. Let's give it a chance.
I guess this is just something that frustrates me when I talk to people who like believe in sort of like a multiverse thing, is that I feel like a lot of it is just sort of like people getting excited about probabilities and statistics and then sort of misunderstanding what the point of them is, right? Or it's like the whole point is that not all of the possibilities happen. That's why it's useful, is that like we're giving the percentage likelihood that it happens. And that's kind of an interesting fact about the world, that like you can have a likelihood of something and it still not happen, you know?
Yeah. That might not be the only point though. Like there's other valid perspectives when it comes to that. And even using statistics and probabilities, this is like another side quibble, but like, I mean, we can put a math equation saying this or this or this, but like, I don't know like how much that actually represents anything.
Well, I mean, right. It's
Like
easier
the die, right? You can
have
divide it
discrete
into
ones.
like there's a 1 in 6 chance that this happens.
Right.
But like that's useful. I just don't know like when it comes to like actual what's happening that it's like the be all end all.
I don't think it needs to be the be all end all though.
Okay.
Like, does anyone like? I don't think that's the claim.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have to get sidetracked here.
Yeah.
But I see your perspective. I'm trying to make mine known. Let's see where we're at. It's going to be a lot of the same thing, I think, here. No evolutionary line is a dead one. Therefore, if in your system it disappears, it emerges within another. All probable materializations of life and consciousness have their day and create those conditions within which they can flourish. And their day, in your terms, is eternal. This is right in line with like where we're at here.
Right.
You're not buying this, Joe.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I just don't. Possibility means possibility, right? It doesn't mean actuality.
Unless you're saying that means actuality. I mean, no one's asking you to believe this. We're just entertaining it.
Right.
Keep going a little bit. I'm speaking now in this chapter mainly about your own planet and solar system, but the same applies to all aspects of your physical universe. You are aware, then, of only one specific, delicately balanced but unique portion of physical existence. You are not only creatures of corporeal being, forming images of flesh and blood embedded in a particular kind of space and time. You are also creatures rising out of a particularized dimension of probabilities, born from dimensions of actuality richly suited to your own development, enrichment, and growth. Seth says stuff like this a lot, and I always think of it as like a pat on the head. You know, like we can focus on, and some of our major religions do focus on like how this existence is like pure suffering and we have to escape it. But like I get encouraged when he's saying like, yeah, this is richly suited to your own development, because I find a way to see that, and I think given the choice, I'd prefer to believe that. You know what I mean? Does existence to you guys, does that feel like it's suited to development?
I think anyone can see it from both perspectives. I mean, like, the schools I went to when I was attending them could be described by some as suffering
Yeah.
and a karmic cycle
We
that I
focus
have
on
to
that
escape.
part of it.
Yeah, but like looking back in hindsight, I'm like, wow, those schools were pretty richly suited to my development, enrichment, and growth.
Yeah.
Like,
I think just like the nature of life, like we can call it suffering, but I think it's less accurate than saying life has suffering. And we've talked a little bit about pain, but I've concluded that pain is a signal, and it's a signal that's related to your own value fulfillment. You feel pain when something you value is being obstructed. And so therefore life isn't suffering. You can't just stop there. It has this feature where suffering is possible, but it's pointing towards larger things of what life actually is. And to me, it's development, enrichment, and growth. It's a good way to describe it. Look deep in thought, Joe.
I just don't want to go on another tangent.
We're not anti-tangent. We just can't go too far in one direction too many times.
Yeah.
So I guess pick your battles. I don't know.
Yeah, pick your battles.
We can always take it out if it's terrible. Anything else coming right up here?
So I guess, okay, go off of that. It goes on once we get to 202 to sort of, I'm going to just read a little further.
Yeah.
If I can find it. If you have any intuitive understanding as yet concerning the nature of the entity or whole self, you will see that it has placed you in a position in which certain abilities, insights, and experience can be realized, and in which your unique kind of consciousnesses can be nurtured. Your slightest experience has far more repercussions within this multidimensional environment than the physical brain can conceive. For if you are intently preoccupied with what may seem to be one infinitesimally minute aspect of reality, and while you seem to be completely embedded within it, only the most surface elements of the self are so entranced. But I do not like the term surface in this regard, though I have used it to suggest the multitudinous portions of the self that are otherwise engaged. Some of them are entranced by this reality as you are in yours. Right. Yeah, like the thing that you read and then sort of that one, I've sort of got written here. Just there's this interesting idea of like, have you guys heard of like the fine tuning argument?
Mm-mm.
It's like, since this is a chapter about God, right? Like one of the arguments for God is this idea that if you look on like the cosmological scale, like it seems to be that our reality is like minutely fine tuned for life to exist.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at like the accidents of how Earth is, right? Like you could make the argument that Earth is like uniquely suited to be hospitable to the development of life. Like we have these like oceans that are very rich in like the specific type of materials that are necessary to create biological life, as well as the fact that we have oceans at all, right? Like water is really, really thermodynamically important because it has like a melting, freezing, and like evaporating temperatures that are all like within a certain boundary.
As we're learning, as we're fucking with the Earth's temperature.
As we are currently learning, yeah, like there's a certain thermodynamic limit, right, where water becomes useful.
Like changing the Earth's temperature by 1 degree has pretty noticeable consequences.
Mm-hmm. And then if you change it by a degree Fahrenheit, or no, Celsius, it's even bigger,
right? Right, yeah.
But then not just that, right? Like we're at a certain band away from the sun in a certain kind of orbit with a certain kind of tilt. And we have the moon, right? The moon's like so important for like the development of life as like, you know, like in the lab, you have the little like metal like thing that like spins the beaker to like make sure all the shit gets mixed around. Like the moon does that for us. Like it moves all the material around the earth. It like pulls the tides, right? So we're like this weird...
and also how the moon was developed. It's bananas.
Is bananas, right?
Yeah.
Like such a weird accident of like cosmological events.
Yeah, dude. Does anyone have a good overview of it?
I'm waiting for like
for
the other shoe to drop because
Yeah.
I feel like you're gonna say, but
Whatever.
evolution. I mean, I feel like I know what you're gonna say, so I'm just like waiting with bated breath.
Okay, let me pull the story a little further, right? And then even if we don't just consider like on this macro scale, like this argument can be taken to like in terms of like deeper physics, right? Like there's certain like they talk about like the cosmological constants, right? Like the speed of light, like what gravity's like numerical value is in relation to things. Like all of these like deep parts of like how the fabric of reality is constructed just happen to be in such a way that biological life can exist. So the argument from...
Can I guess what you're going to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
That the like physical universe is like so big or infinitely big that this sort of conditions would have to exist.
Don't ruin it.
No, can I guess what you're gonna say?
Yeah.
That saying that what you're talking about is the same as using a sieve or a colander to sort say, beans or oats and be like, wow, the
wait,
oats
wait, wait,
are
wait.
exactly the same size
wait.
as the holes in these sieves.
Wait, I gotta finish it for the listener. Okay, so the fi- the final analysis is that the theist can be like, it's so like well developed and fine tuned for our specific type of beings that like obviously some like benevolent deity created it like that so that we could live really good lives in that universe. Like they created it for us. Because how could it be like that except for it to be there for us, right?
Mhm.
Okay, now go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I mean, evolution just says everything else that wasn't suited to this environment freaking died. So
Right.
you can't just use, like, a colander to sort grains of rice and be like, whoa, the holes in the colander are exactly the same size as a grain of rice. Yeah, that's what happens when you put rice in a colander and shake it. It'll sort.
All the other stuff's still in the colander.
All the other stuff is still in the colander. Got weeded out by natural selection. I mean, I get it. And that's why, like, last week I was like, Michael, you can't use that argument against the material scientists. They're not, like, that argument is too easily refuted. I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm saying that we don't have enough evidence to push that forward. We should actually look at the things that materialism can explain and ask the materialists, but what about that?
Yeah. I recently read a quote that used the same sort of concept against, the certainties of science. So it was some quote about like, we've concluded that all the fish in the ocean are like over 1 inch. And then they figured out, oh, they were using like 1-inch nets. It was that sort of thing. Whereas like the same sort of like misdirection happens with science because we have only certain and so many and certain decently ways of measuring things.
Or like the famous story that people tell of like when they put armor on the planes, right? And they were like putting the armor on the wings of the plane, and then they were like, why are our planes keep getting shot down? Have you heard this one, Michael? Like, was it World War One?
I don't remember which World War.
One of the world wars, like there was this like study performed on like, okay, like where should we armor our planes so that they get shot down less? And at first they like brought out this, they did like sort of a model where they were like recording every time a plane came back, like where were they getting shot, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, it seems like the planes are getting shot a lot in the wings and in the tails of the plane. So like we're gonna add extra armor to the wings and the tails of the plane because that's where they're getting shot, right? Because that makes sense. The problem is, somebody realized very quickly, we're only looking at where the planes that got back to base were shot. And it seems like none of the planes that got back to base got shot in the engine or in the pilot's compartment. Like, maybe the reason that none of them got shot there is because they did get shot there. All those ones didn't make it back to base, right?
This supports my like desire to like reach into the greater context of things. It makes sense, even if it has to be in a vulnerable way. We don't have ways to like extend our certainty into theory so far. We have to like just actually like I say, we have to like just entertain these ideas. Do you know what I mean? Like,
No.
I'm like extrapolating from that example, but like they didn't use their imagination to broaden the context, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a sampling error, right?
Yeah.
Since we're talking about probability during this episode, like it's a problem in taking sampling, right?
Yeah. So to tie that back to where we just were, like how
Bring the listener back. What was your original point with all that?
Oh, I'm just saying, like, it seems like kind of what we're getting from Seth here is a little bit of a version of sort of like a fine-tuning argument, right? That like this reality is so well developed for like our, personal development that obviously like it's intended for us to be developed in.
Yeah, except for he's not. He's just telling it's this way. He's not saying therefore it's real. You know what I mean? He's doing a little bit different thing.
Is he not? Or is he just not being explicit about it?
How would you tell the difference between he's not doing it and he's not being explicit about it?
You just read between the lines, read
I don't-
intentionalities. You can read intentionality out of text.
No, he just says, like, this is, I mean, among all his books, he just says, this is the way it is. I mean, it's not really up for debate. If you don't want to believe it, you don't want to believe it. But he also says elsewhere, not everyone has to believe this. It's perfectly fine for you to live a materialistic life.
I think if he was trying to make this like as convincing as possible, that he would have written different books.
Yeah, I don't think he's trying to.
He never says like, this is true and let me explain to you from your perspective why. even though if there's like some overlap in there, you know what I mean? Like I don't see him doing that.
But like that's the conversation we just had like before I brought this up, right? As we were talking about like, oh, isn't it great that like the world is set up in such a way that like it causes our ideal like development, you know?
Like that's sort of the
What's the
takeaway.
conclusion?
Well, that was the takeaway that we had from what we read, right? Was like,
Like when Seth said that, that resonated with my own personal experience and view of the world. That's where I am at.
got you.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I mean, I could argue that the New York public education system was not set up for me at all.
Right, that's true because you were
Like-
saying that it's sort of
But we're talking about life broadly, not just one institution.
we're talking about the moon.
Yeah, but like when I say it was richly suited for my development, enrichment, and growth, it wasn't. I'm not saying it was tailored for me because it certainly was not tailored for an Asian girl with undiagnosed ADHD. It really wasn't. Like, if anything, it's suited for neurotypicals, and they are still actively trying to change the way my high school accepts people by not making it purely test score based and making it also interview based so that fewer Asians get in. It's not richly suited, but I found it a great learning ground.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that Seth is saying, by the way, because your earth and your moon, your environment, your oceans are so suited for you that this is proof that this was made. I don't think he cares to convert to people who are not willing to see it that way.
Sure.
Yeah, I do feel like it's like if you're ready for this or if you are into this, it's for you. And if you're not, it's not for you.
Okay.
It's literally not, it's the body of this work isn't like an argument, in philosophical terms. It just, we need like philosophical muscles to contend with it a little bit.
I will also say that in one of the class sessions, like Jane would have classes, I think, on Tuesday where people would just hang out in her apartment. In one of the classes, a guy was asking Seth, my girlfriend does not believe in you or any of your teachings. Should I break up with her? And then Seth got pissed at the guy and was like, no. How dare you think that that is a valid reason for leaving her? So like he isn't saying you all have to believe that this is a school, that you're multidimensional to be able to graduate or benefit from this reality. Like if I'm running a daycare, I mean not a daycare, if I'm running a summer camp to teach Girl Scouts survival skills and they think it's just a fun summer camp, I'm not going to go there and like bash over their head like, no, this isn't fun, this is educational, this is like real stuff, we're teaching you real life skills like cooperation. You're not going to be able to graduate from this summer camp unless you learn that this is actually education, like disguised as a fun summer camp. Like I don't need to do that for them to benefit from it. They can just go on their merry way thinking that this is just a fun, happy place.
Sure.
There's no skin off my back. Like we're not meant to necessarily know all these things or be right about everything to be able to gain and finish here.
I kind of like mean camp counselor Liana, though.
Yeah, more mean camp counselor. This is about survival.
Stop having fun.
I want to reread this one part here. For if you are intensely preoccupied with what may seem to be one infinitesimally minute aspect of reality, and while you seem to be completely embedded within it, only the most surface elements of the self are so entranced. A couple things going on there, and he goes on to say that he doesn't like the term surface, but he uses it. And I think what he means by the term surface, and also what he means by he doesn't like it, we understand that the surface is like the conscious level because we have this Freudian sense of it's like, then it's the subconscious or the unconscious or whatever. But Seth makes pains to always say that all these levels are conscious. And he even goes so far to say they're more conscious than we think we are. So like maybe a better term than surface, if you can hold that whole concept together, is like a facet. Like all these layers are on their own surface, so they're just different facets of the same thing.
I think he just doesn't want us to see it like in a hierarchical manner. That like
Yeah,
ego you is not less important than super self you.
right. But because we are like born into space and time, we use all of our languages like is embedded with like spatial metaphor, right?
Right.
another thing I just wrote from that paragraph that like I said this last week. And again, this isn't trying to be a jumping off point for a tangent, but I said we are not in time and space are in us. And when I did like look into a little bit of quantum physics, like when physicists were describing objects as actual events, they were speaking in those terms too. They were saying like an object as an event is duration, they contain time. Like that quote, like we are not in time and space is in us. I first heard that from a physicist. Not that that's like trying to like prove anything, but I'm just saying like there's quite a bit of compatibility with these ideas. I might be biased. I might be looking for those compatibilities, but I'm here to bring them forward.
My perspective is if this is the valid reality, then science will eventually prove it out, or at least see that not everything is adding up.
I think there's going to be a world war between the materialists and the idealists. Kidding. One more paragraph in this session here. The entity, the true multidimensional self, is aware of all of its experiences, and this knowledge is to some extent available to these other portions of the self, including, of course, the physical self as you know it. These various portions of the self, in fact, will eventually, in your terms, become fully aware, period. This awareness will automatically alter what now seems to be their nature and add to their multiplicitude of existence. Don't see that word multiplicitude every day. It's getting hard for me to like know which stuff like I think a lot of this is going to be new to a lot of listeners, so I want to read it anyways, but like it's getting harder for me to like tell like what's really novel and what's not because I'm so
That is a really good
familiar with
point.
this material.
Yeah.
I'm getting the same thing where like the more we read into it, the more like you just read a paragraph and then you just kind of go like, okay, like that's some like Seth fluff.
Joe's getting bored with it because it's like it drills it.
Well, because like, what does it mean? Like, the entity in true multidimensional self is aware of all of its experiences, and this knowledge is to some extent available to these other portions of the self, including, of course, the physical self as you know it. The various portions of the self will, in fact,
Eventually become fully aware.
like, it's like, okay, cool, Seth.
Like,
Uh-huh.
okay.
I will say, there's reading this, like I still get something from it. Like I said, it's not always like as novel as it was the first couple times coming across some ideas. And there's always things that I didn't see before. And it all builds in a way that it does build a greater context, in my opinion.
I mean, I think some of this can be like, I think some of this can be practically applicable in the sense that he's saying that you are a part of your entity and all these other selves that he's saying exist, you can like draw from in terms of intuition or knowledge.
right.
And he does guide, I think, Rob through this because somewhere in the books, Rob starts to have dreams about his other reincarnational selves as like a woman and I think like a soldier at sea. But he also does talk to Rob about like other probable Robs. And it's not like immediately applicable here, but personally, I generally like to recommend that people read Nature, Person, Reality, but I have to tell them that they should read Seth Speaks first because it lays a lot of the groundwork for the concepts that they need and the, I guess, vocabulary that they need to understand Nature, Person, Reality a lot easier. So like I see this as just him like setting the stage
Right.
for the actual applicable stuff later where he can say you can draw like actual abilities, say like playing the piano or painting from your other selves
Yeah.
from here. But I think it's also possibly comforting to people to know that they are part of this entity. They don't just get like dissolved and mixed into it with their individuality lost. But like this entity is aware of them and is looking out for them and like has placed them intentionally here for this. Like you're not just like flicked out into this chaotic world where you have to like fend for survival.
It's interesting the way when you get a bigger, broader look on the way that this material unfolded. It's like you say, like that was always a big debate when I was, I'd read, 4 or 5 books when I think I found the Seth Book Club, but nobody had like a solid answer, or everyone had a different answer for like which book do you recommend when you like introduce somebody to this. And then, this is like the session 560 that we're coming up on. Like a lot has happened before that, and a lot of those sessions go way deeper than these ones do. this just happens to be the first book for a broad consumer readership, and so it has to inform them in a certain way, I guess. It's interesting, like reading some of the first sessions. Like, I don't know if it was you that we recently commented on this, but it was just like, I don't know, like session 22 or something, and it was already like way deep. It was like,
Yeah.
damn, got right into it. My perspective is just like some of those sessions, like Seth was just trying to get as much of the good stuff out as possible.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, Jane could have a heart attack.
Got to get that stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that now because, like, I think, there's probably, according to this, some probabilities where, like, only so many sessions got out. So, like,
But that's okay because the entities attached.
To those people are still attached to the reality where all the stuff got
Yeah.
well, that was kind of what he was saying in this paragraph. These various portions of the self will, in fact, eventually, in your terms, become fully aware, period. That's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah.
In a less cheeky way.
More cheeky, Seth. Be cheeky, Seth.
He's got his moments.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.